This is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords. And today I'm going to talk to you about one of the things that's annoying about the SJW movement. But before I do that, I want to point out, first of all, I want to thank everyone who between my last video and this one has subscribed to this channel. As I mentioned in that video, I can't do a live stream from my phone again because they've changed the rules on it until I get 1,000 subscribers. And at that time of 5 days ago, 5 days ago as of this filming anyways, I was at 913 subscribers, and now the last time I checked it's 980. So I just need 20 more people to subscribe to this channel, and then we will have the 1,000th subscriber commemorative live stream, and it'll be great. So see if you can do that. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to this channel, and if you have, share the channel, share this video, share the other videos you think are good, tell people to subscribe. Let's see if we can get over the top, the last push, and then we're going to be, in Berlin by Christmas, and that'll be that. So if you can do that, that would be great. And just in general, it's great to subscribe, because if you subscribe and to share especially, one of the best ways you can thank me for making a video you like is to share that video so other people get to see it too. And that way the word is spread. So, getting to today's, well, not quite today's topic, but getting there. It's been pointed out to me that I like to make rambling introductions before I get to the point. So I'm going to stay true to my type. Today I had a discussion on Twitter that was again about this subject of, what is a gamer? And you would think it would be self-evident. A gamer is a person who plays a game, right? A D&D gamer is someone who plays D&D, or an RPG gamer is someone who plays tabletop RPGs. And yet you always have these people that are coming in and they're saying, well, but what if they don't? If they don't, they're not a gamer. Oh, but what if they feel like they're one? There was some guy that came along in this conversation, and he was saying, like, well, that words don't necessarily mean things, right? That you can change it. Because I said, words mean thing. Gamer means a person who games, right? That's what it means. If you don't game, you're not a gamer, right? And he said, well, you're using an obsolete version of the word. If a collective of people agree to change it, then that's different. That becomes a different thing, and you're just holding on to the past or something like that, right? So I pointed out to this guy that he was simultaneously trying to argue that words have no real power, right? That there's nothing solid about them, there's nothing defined about them, and that at the same time, it was crucially important that this word be defined the way he wanted it to be defined, right? So he was trying to play it off both sides. And SJWs, the reason I'm telling you this is because SJWs often want to play it off both sides. Today I've got in my background here Lion and Dragon and Heirs of Indra, both games I made. Heirs of Indra was the earlier one by quite a few years. I made it even before I worked on 5th edition. It's from like 2013. It's a game set in epic India, in the Indian fantasy world of the Mahabharata, of the classic Indian epic adventure saga, and one of the two main ones, the other one being the Ramayana, and it's an OSR game that is completely meant to immerse you as much as possible within the realms of playability into Indian culture as depicted in those epic myths, right? Like, you're not going to play a peasant or something like that. You're going to play a hero, probably. Or if you are a peasant, you're going to be the servant of a hero or something like that, right? So it's a heroic adventure, but it's set in this culture, and it's meant to immerse you in this culture, right? Lion and Dragon does something not quite the same, but very close, which is that it's meant to be a simulator of a medieval authentic version of the classic old school rules, right? So it's meant to play in a world that assumes that this is the world of medieval Europe, the way the medieval Europeans would have imagined it, right? So it has magic, it has monsters, because medieval Europeans believed that there was magic and monsters, right? And the magic and the monsters works the way that these people assume that it works. And it has all of their conceits, right, including monotheism, right, that there's one God, right, that there's this strict social hierarchy, right, the roles of men and women, all of these sorts of things. I give a little bit of leeway in some of these things, right? Like I say, well, you know, your fantasy game can still be medieval authentic and be monotheistic of a different religion, as long as that different religion is close enough that it looks like enough like the Catholic Church for it to really be medieval, right? If you don't have a strong, centralized, universal church with a monotheistic thematic, then it's going to be very hard for it to be medieval authentic, right? But you could do like the Unconquered Sun, which is what I said as, like, you know, basically in Dark Albion, I just, you know, erased Jesus and put in the Unconquered Sun and kept everything else the same. But this was just to make sure that people who had like some kind of issue of role playing in a world of Christianity, you know, would suddenly not have that issue anymore, right? If you've got Dark Albion and you want to feel free to substitute it back for Jesus, go right ahead. I don't care. But the point is that in these two games, you have one game that is absolutely about European culture and one that is absolutely not, right? That is from a completely different culture. And we have this funny situation with SJWs, which is that when Arrows of Indra came out, and this is not exclusive to me, it's not that they're having a problem specifically with me, but that they've done this to many other people too, right? When Arrows of Indra came out, I got a whole bunch of criticism from the SJWs about things along the lines of, you know, cultural appropriation, you know, inappropriate because I'm not an Indian myself, you know, all of these sorts of things. And basically accusations that somehow it was, you know, even though it's a completely faithful, completely admiring look at Indian culture, you know, from the epic myths of their literature, of their legends, of their mythology, their creatures and their world, right? It's in no way mocking Indian culture at all, right? It's super respectful. There was this accusation that it was somehow racist, right? Why? Because I'm not Indian, and I made an Indian RPG with Indian people in it, right? And then on the other hand, when Lion and Dragon came out, I got accused of being racist because it's a European game full of white people in it, right? And how dare I make a game that doesn't show, you know, the diversity melange, right? The sherbet of multicolored images, where your fantasy setting in your medieval world looks like the demographics of downtown Seattle, right? So this is the great paradox that I think is just absolute bullshit, of course, which is this idea the SJWs have that lets you be screwed no matter which way you look at it, right? If you don't put in cultures other than Western cultures in your game setting, you're a racist. If you do put in cultures other than Western cultures in your setting, you're a racist, right? This is the two options that they give you. And of course, you know, the answer to this is just to ignore them, basically, right? But let's talk about this. Let's spin this out a little bit more, right? The notion that it would be racist to put in other cultures or to ignore other cultures as a blanket statement is something that can only exist in the mind of an identitarian racist, right? Of someone who either is, you know, so caught up in identitarian politics that to them the mere inclusion and or exclusion of a certain race is an unforgivable act, right? And of course, in the case of the regressive left, their particular perspective on this is also that basically anything done by a Westerner, a white Westerner, I'm a Latino Westerner, but I'm pretty, you know, as you can see when you see my hands, I'm pretty white-skinned, right? Anything done by a white Westerner is bound to be racist no matter what, right? So there's no way to obtain forgiveness except to be one of the, you know, politically correct woke types, and then you can get away with just about anything, right? Like, I mean, there's some stuff that I have seen in the SJW game worlds that are just ridiculously stupid, that are just absurdly patronizing or racist or both. And of course they get away with it because they're the right kind of people. Sorry, just shaking up my coffee there. So they can get away with it because they're the right kinds of people, whereas, you know, a normal white-skinned person cannot. If you're not one of the people that has got the groovy badge of being part of the woke crowd, the woke-in crowd, then obviously everything you do is going to be wrong. So you shouldn't even, first of all, if you're a game designer and you're concerned about this, you shouldn't even try to placate these people, right? Make the game that you want to make. So let's say you are an OSR designer, or you want to be an OSR designer. You're making a fantasy world, or a pseudo-fantasy world, or a historical world, or whatever, right? But you're making a world where this would be a subject that could come up. And you don't really buy into the SJW stuff, but you are concerned about this question of, you know, that you don't want to actually do something wrong, right? So here's what I would tell you. Don't worry about what they're saying, but worry about what you're presenting, right? Is your game world blatantly stereotypical, right? And if it is, why, right? Like, for a long, long time, most game worlds were blatantly stereotypical. And you'll note SJWs will try to present it as, oh, for a long time, most non-European game settings were blatantly stereotypical. It's like Oriental Adventures. Oriental Adventures, the original one way back then, was blatantly stereotypical. There's no question about it. But so was Greyhawk, right? So is the Forgotten Realms. They're all stereotypes, right? Like most of the old fantasy worlds, with maybe the exception of Tecumel, which hardly anyone played, were blatant stereotypes, right? They were just like a movie version. They were a version written by guys who had come from the American Midwest, who most of whom did not have, you know, a degree in the humanities, and certainly not in like history or the history of other cultures or anything like that, cultural studies of any kind. And what they made was stuff that they kind of just got from movies, right, and TV, and stuff they just assumed, and what little they had learned in high school about it, right? So like Oriental Adventures has, you know, ninjas and samurais and Chinese monsters and wizards and all this stuff, right? Like it's all just piled in there, right? Anything vaguely Asian is in Oriental Adventures, right? It is in no way making any effort to be faithful to the historicity of the setting. But they're exactly the same with Greyhawk, right? Like Greyhawk isn't an authentic interpretation of the medieval world, right? It's not like, oh yeah, this is exactly what, you know, medieval England was like in the 15th century. No, it's a big mishmash of, you know, Robin Hood movies and Jack Vance novels and all sorts of other stuff that's just messed up in there. It's whatever Gary liked, right? Whatever Gary Gygax wanted, he just stuffed it all in there, right? And it's pretty much the same. You see slightly, a very slight level of evolution, but barely in the Mystara Gazetteers, where you get some stuff that is, you know, they're still very stereotypical though, like the Emirates of Ilrealm and the you know the Ottrigan clans, you know, the those were the like Arab part and the Native American part. There's a lot of stereotypical stuff in those gazetteers from that world. But you could say the same thing about the Viking place, right? Like this wasn't a product of some kind of racism. It was just a product of a general lack of cultural education, right? That's what I'm saying. So now you have the choice if you're designing a world. Like you can make, I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with making a world where if the genre you are emulating is not history, and just don't make sure you don't then pretend it is, right? You've got to make it really clear if what you're doing is you're emulating like, you know, Hong Kong action films and not the actual history of China, then you can do that, right? That's okay. The main thing is you have to be very careful not to do anything that is disrespectful, right? That you're creating something where it's intentionally trying to offend, right? Or even unintentionally, right? So how do you really offend? For an SJW, the offense is the thing itself. But I'm going to let you in on a secret as someone who spent a lot of time with at least quite a few other cultures, right? Indian culture, Chinese culture, and Latin American culture. Most people, especially that are in kind of like the fringes or completely outside of the West, who are therefore not infested with this sense of personal guilt over, whatever you've been told you're supposed to be guilty about by the entire establishment in the Western world from 1946 onwards, right? People who don't have that, who don't feel like, that somehow they have to atone for the sins of imperialism, they don't usually have a problem with you being interested in their culture, right? Like if you go to any Indian community, right, and you show a genuine interest in what they're doing, right, like you want to go into a Sikh Gurdwara, right, they're going to welcome you with open arms. They're going to want to show you how to put on a turban, right? They're going to want to give you their food to try and all this stuff, right? They're incredibly friendly people, right? If you go to a Chinese community, right, and you show that you want to learn the right way to drink tea and how to play Chinese chess, they'll be really, really cool with that, right? And it's the same thing if you're designing a setting and you're trying to show an adequate level of admiration. You don't have to be perfect at it. You just have to make an effort, right? So if you want to be authentic, just you can do a minimum of research to maintain that authenticity, right? And you should be doing the same with the perspective of your Western fantasy, right? Like, what are you basing your Western fantasy on? Like, is your fantasy inspired by other modern fantasy, right? Like, are you basically just trying to make your setting be Game of Thrones or the Sword of Shannara or Lord of the Rings or something like that? Well, okay, then do it that way, right? But don't think that what you're playing is in some way an authentic interpretation of Western culture, right? It's just it's the American Hollywood version of it, the American Hollywood Disneyland version of it. It's the Fun Time Renaissance Fair, right? Which is still a hell of a lot more fun than what the SJWs want to do, which is to force every RPG to be set in a medievalized version of modern day Seattle or Portland, right? Where you have to be spending most of the time talking about social justice awareness rather than doing anything fun, right? Because that does seem to be the end goal, right? You can't win one way or the other unless you submit to that sort of notion. And this kind of world that is just this big mush of nothing except this kind of, lip service to some kind of diversity because you have lots of blue-skinned and purple-skinned creatures, even though you're not doing anything real for diversity, right? So make your games, be respectful of the genre they're trying to emulate, first of all. And if that genre is a culture, make sure they're respectful of the culture that they're trying to emulate. And as for the rest, really don't worry about it, right? As soon as you start to apologize, you've lost, right? Don't buy into this nonsense, and instead focus yourself on making something good, making a good product, right? You shouldn't be worried about what other people will think about what you make. Not in the creative sense, at least, maybe in the commercial sense, right? Like, is what you're making something that'll sell? But in the creative sense, what you should be worrying about is whether what you're going to make is something that is really worthy of you to make, right? And so you want to make the effort that if you plan to produce an RPG book that's going to be in some form available to the public, that it be worthy of your effort, right? You're the person you need to successfully impress, and you shouldn't put your standards too low for that. So I guess that's what I wanted to say. If you like what I've talked about, you can. I think really the best way you can support me. I do have a Patreon channel, right? But or a Patreon page or whatever it's called, right? But the best way you can support me is by purchasing my products. If you've already got Lion and Dragon, you might want to check out Arrows of Indra. It's pretty cool too. It's got a lot of material, just like Lion and Dragon, just like all the OSR. There's tons of stuff in these books that even if you don't end up playing the game by itself, you can use in your other campaigns, right? Whatever else you're running that's OSR or D&D based, right? So you can always get it for that sort of material. And you can also pick up from my RPG Pundit Presents series. Those are a series of short PDFs that come out one every week. They're really inexpensive. If you want to support me and you don't really want to show, I mean, Lion and Dragon's like $24, right? If you don't want to shell out $24, you can shell out like $2.49 for an issue of RPG Pundit Presents. This week, we have RPG Pundit Presents Medieval Authentic Aristocracy. So there you are. If you want to learn about the way aristocrats really were in the medieval period, this book, I've got to tell you, it does have a random table in it, but it's not so much a game aid as a setting fluff aid, right? It tells you all about the lives of what medieval aristocrats and how they lived, what their ranks were, how you addressed them properly, what their pastimes were, what their day looked like, where they lived, what they did. Lords and ladies, knights, and all of the gentry, and to give you an idea of what that stuff is. So, for example, if you're making a medieval setting and you don't want it to seem like medieval happy fun time world where you don't know the difference between a baron and a duke, right? Never mind who gets to be called sir something or other, then this is a book for you to try, right? So pick it up. It just came out today. Medieval Authentic Aristocracy. You'll find the link to the RPG Pundit Presents series below. And again, most of all, please subscribe. Let's get those last 20 subscribers, and then we'll be up to 1,000, and we'll be ready to go with the live stream that I'll do not on the weekend probably because I'm gaming, but later, at the earliest possible opportunity. From when we hit 1,000. And I will try my best to announce it beforehand. I don't know how to announce it, but I'll try my best. Give me hints about how the hell I can announce it to make sure that people know. And yeah, so subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video everywhere that you can. Thank you. Currently smoking Lorenzetti Volcano plus Cornell and Deal's Morning Drive.